in the Facebook group and in our Stars in Higher Ed group. And I need to, Amy, do we have the link to join? We do on the center website.
Yes.
Once you get started, I will find that. So if anybody has not officially joined Stars in Higher Ed, Stronger Together, the Alliance for Reading Science and Higher Education, that's our national alliance for supporting each other to move towards the science of reading in our coursework and field experiences. And we want to make sure we've got you on the list so we can communicate when there are events and happenings. So I'll put that link there in just a minute. So what we're going to do today is share a couple of examples of course configurations is the way I think about it. Some of you are aware that Amy and I were contracted by the Ohio Department of Education to create model syllabi several years ago now, because Ohio has 4 required courses in reading, and they wanted some examples. And so we've had those out there for a while. We keep saying we're going to get around to revising them, and we haven't done that yet. But even better than that, our doctoral students have engaged in creating a variety of versions of courses. So because people have said to us over the years, you know, those 4 courses are great, but we only have 2 courses in reading, or we only have 3, or, you know, that's one way to do it, but we're organized differently and we'd like to see other examples. So today's the day where you get to see some other examples. So we have the folks who have been involved in that assignment in our doctoral program with us, and some other doctoral students. So wave if you're an MSJ doctoral student, so people know who you are. Yeah, there they are. Some from both of our cohorts. And so if we have time to peruse them after we kind of overview them, we will break into small groups to do that. And we definitely want to source up any examples that you have. So there's a couple of ways that we can do that. We'd like to just create a collection of these options for people to have on the Mount St. Joseph University Center for Reading Science website. So if you have some examples that you would be willing to share, you can email them to me, and we will get them posted. You can post them with your name and university, or you can take that off, however you want to do it. But everybody really benefits from seeing multiple ways that this work can be configured and delivered. So that's our agenda today. And I'll put my email address in the chat in just a second. So we have 2 examples of a 4-course sequence. Amy's going to start with the model syllabi that are currently posted on the center website. Then you'll get to see an additional example. And I think one of our doctoral students from that group might talk us through that. We have just some slides to guide that conversation, hitting the highlights. Just what is the sequence, what are the names of the courses, textbooks that are used, any key assignments that you'd like to mention to the group. And then you'll get to see an example of a 3-course configuration and a 2-course configuration. So Amy, you're gonna
So I'll start. Yeah, so I'll start by just describing the work the doctoral students were asked to do. So as Stephanie described, Stephanie, myself, and then another colleague, Beth Corbeau, were asked by the state of Ohio to create some example syllabi for some higher ed work that the state of Ohio was doing around trying to move our institutions of higher ed in Ohio to the science of reading. So one of the things that we did, and it's on our website, and I'll point you to it if you haven't seen it, is we created a 4-course, because in Ohio, that's what we are required to do in teacher prep, is at least 4 courses. And we also created a planning tool. And this planning tool the purpose of it was to help faculty understand here are the things that you want to cover if you're doing the science of reading across your program. So however you do it, you want to cover all of these standards. And if you look at our planning tool and you understand the IDA knowledge and practice standards, it will look familiar because the IDA knowledge and practice standards are embedded within our planning tool. So it's the IDA knowledge and practice standards, as well as some other things, because we felt like there were things that IDA did not cover that we felt were important, like MTSS, understanding data, that we included as well. One of the reasons we didn't just use the IDA knowledge and practice standards was that at least at that time in Ohio, there was a little pushback against IDA. So if you're in a state that might have some of that pushback, that was one of the reasons we created a planning tool that was not exactly IDA, although we gave credit to IDA, of course, because the knowledge and practice standards are absolutely fabulous. If you don't know about those, definitely check out the knowledge and practice standards from the International Dyslexia Association.
Amy,
So,
go ahead. Would you clarify which programs or majors Ohio requires that for reading courses for?
Yeah, so Ohio requires it for all teachers in early childhood, elementary, and special education. They require a 3-course sequence for those in adolescence. So, and middle childhood. Pretty much everybody except adolescents is required to have the 4-course sequence, and adolescence has a 3-course requirement. So, and I know I've learned, I didn't know at first, but I've learned from doing work in other states and nationally that is pretty unique, that many of you do not have requirements. And some of you I know are working with, as Stephanie said, 2 courses or 3 courses. And I know in some cases it is 1 course, but we did not feel that was something that was really possible. So we know you have to do it, but we debated that actually in our syllabus project, and we wanted to have at least 2 courses to show covering all of the IDA knowledge and practice standards. So as Stephanie said, we've been working with different states and getting a lot of questions like, hey, could you have examples of 2 courses or 3? And we didn't. And we have a new doctoral program we started last May. And our doctoral program is a bit unique in terms of who our students are. It is a program that's designed for current leaders in education who want to get their doctorate. So all of our students have a depth of practical knowledge and work in schools and districts and states. And many of them are actually already working in higher education. They're instructors or assistant professors at a university without having that terminal degree. So they're a wonderful group to work with on creating different sets of syllabi to show as examples. So this fall, they took a class with me, and actually it was me and my dean, Dr. Laura Saylor, co-taught it. And it's just finishing up this week. And part of that course was all about teaching and supervision in higher education. So we had a project where we asked them to sign up in teams, and this is the spreadsheet of our teams. And I gave them different kind of program scenarios, and then they could sign up for them. So you can see group 1 has 2 courses that they have to cover all of the planning tool standards, that are all the IDA knowledge and practice standards, and it's an 8-week course. And I worked with Stephanie to create this project, and we kind of did it based on kind of what we had been asked for from the field. And so we have kind of different configurations that we think match some different things that are out there that people are trying to do. As I said, we didn't do the 1 course. Stephanie was pushing for the 1 course, and I thought it was going to be too hard. And I think my doctoral students would agree that it would be too hard because the 2-course people were sweating it. They had they had a hard time covering everything you want to cover. There's just so much to cover, as we know. So this work right now is being finished up. The steps of the project, just so you can kind of understand what's available, and we're going to give you a preview of some of the work that they did. So the first step was they signed up for a format. And so this whole team worked together, and they created a 3-course across 8 weeks. So each of the format was 8 weeks. And I told them some of them decided that they would do it in an online format. Some of them decided face-to-face and some of them in a hybrid. So they got to choose what kind of format they were doing, and they would note that at the beginning of it. So they signed up, and then they worked on designing their courses, and they had to create a syllabus for each course in their program. But they had to work together because they wanted alignment across the 2 or 3 or 4 courses. And the requirement was they did have to include all the IDA knowledge and practice standards, and you'll see that on our planning tool. We asked to note from the planning tool standard, which IDA standard is that connected to. To do this work, they reviewed other program syllabi. As I said, many of them are in schools of education working, so they were able to look at colleagues. They reached out to other colleagues that they knew were doing good work. They looked at the Mount St. Joe model syllabi. They worked with each other to research texts. We're extremely collaborative in our group, so they really worked across projects as well. And then before they turned it in, they reviewed each other's group. So they were, each group was set up to review another person's, so team 2, group 4 reviewed group 5's work and vice versa. Gave each other really wonderful feedback using the planning tool. So our ask was that they use the planning tool to give feedback. So saying things like, this standard doesn't seem like it was fully covered. Here's a suggestion. So that was a really nice process. And then they made revisions, and then they turned it into me. And then I gave them a feedback, and they are making revisions right now. Some of them have completed that, and they are willing to share with all of you the work they did. Some are finishing that up because our semester is ending this week, and so that is another. Once those are all tidied up, we're going to share on our website all of the different examples. So today we're going to share a couple examples of groups that were further along in making their revisions. And then hopefully in January, we'll be able to share on our website all the different groups. So having some nice examples to share with people. And we're not saying these are perfect, just like the Mount St. Joe model syllabi. These are absolutely not perfect. You know, I'm sure you'll have ideas of ways to change and adapt them for your purpose, but just other examples to hopefully help our field move towards the science of reading in higher ed. So the Mount St. Joe syllabi, which have been out for a while, as Stephanie said, I think, gosh, I can't even remember when we did that now. It was before the pandemic, so 3 years ago at least. Our 4 syllabi reflect the typical format that is asked of in Ohio. So our 4 that we decided on were the foundations of reading. So it's kind of a survey level class, understanding foundational concepts of reading, essential components of reading, important models in the science of reading, National Reading Panel, all of those kinds of things. And then the second course is phonemic awareness and phonics. Then vocabulary fluency and comprehension, which we include writing in that as well, as you'll see in our model syllabi, and reading assessment and intervention. So those are our 4 kind of model syllabi that are available to you on our website. The other thing that you'll see in our model syllabi that may be of help to you, I think it was of help to our doctoral students, is we created these with the purpose of guiding other faculty members. So we created the syllabi as you typically would for your students, but then we also included a lot of additional resources for instructors. So at the end of each of the syllabus that you'll see on our website, we have additional readings that a faculty member might want to do to help them create lectures, or, you know, ideas for resources that could be used to create an assignment or so forth. So you can check those out. So we have some key texts that we use. And one of the things that we do in our model syllabi as well is that we have some texts that we use across all 4 of our courses. And we actually do this at Mount St. Joseph as well. So we use Anita Archer's explicit instruction text. They get that in the very first course, and they use that across all 4 courses as an example. So, oh wait, Stephanie, is this? Oh, this, okay, yeah. So let me switch to the 4 course sequence created by Mount St. Joseph doctoral students. and I can't remember, let's see. If anybody's here who did that 4-course sequence.
That was me.
I was gonna say, I think it was Amanda. Did Amanda show up? Okay, great. Amanda, I'm gonna let you talk about it if you want to, unless you want me to.
Okay, sure.
Briefly, just give them the wide, broad view.
Okay, could you go back to the first slide? Okay, yep, I think that's us.
You want to tell them real quickly your background, because you have some interesting higher ed background.
Sure. So my name's Amanda Nickerson. I was a teacher for a long time, and then I entered into a position as a literacy consultant. You might see lights go out behind me because I'm still in my office right now. And if I don't move, it gets dark. So I also had the experience of working as an adjunct for a couple of different classes over the years at the undergraduate level, of course. And so this was a really fun project for me and an opportunity actually to revisit a course I taught a long time ago that was a little bit more balanced literacy oriented. So I found myself in the same exact position that many of you are in, of looking at an old syllabus and trying to figure out how do I rework this to make it align with the science of reading. And so our group, we had the 4-course sequence. It looks the most like what MSJ's model syllabi does in a sense, because we had 4 courses to work with. So you'll see that it's pretty similar in that we started with the Foundations of Literacy course, and then we had a phonics course, a word recognition course, really, because it encompassed a lot of those different elements. And then we had a course that focused on language comprehension and writing. And then that culminated in a course on assessment and database decision making. I would just say, we didn't feel like we needed to deviate from what MSJ put out as model syllabi, because that is such a nice trajectory for learning. So if you go to the next slide.
Yeah, sorry, Amanda, it looks like I didn't end up listing the texts in your course sequence. I'm sorry about that got left out.
It's okay. I don't have them memorized to speak to them, unfortunately.
Yeah, sorry. I can, yeah, I think that's fine to just, if anybody from your group remembers any of those, or I can pull it up really quickly.
I can pull it up too. You want me to pull them up while you're talking, Amanda?
Sure. I know that my class was the assessment and database decision making, and what we really tried to do.
And we're going to give them a link to this drive. Is this
okay? A little bit. That allows us to hop into each syllabus. It gives sort of an overview.
I can open yours. Do you want me to open yours?
You can. I don't mind. We really did try to think through how we could reduce the number of textbooks that people were purchasing, that students would purchase. So we used the core source book, the teaching reading source book, across all 4 courses. By the time they got to my course, we were just looking mainly at the MTSS chapter, because they've covered most of the other chapters by that point. You'll see by this point in the sequence, we are also looking at the 10 success factors for literacy intervention by Susan Hall. We folded in next steps in literacy instruction because it gave nice lesson planning templates and some instructional methods and lessons and strategies that you could fold in. And then we used the Acadience assessment manual as well, because this class was designed as a reading academy, a tutoring situation. So students would have applied what they learned across the 4 courses by the time they got to this. Trying to think what else to say about textbooks, since I can't recall them all. I'm sorry.
That's okay. Or if there are any assignments that you want to share from your course. Sure. I mean, people will have access, they can peruse it, but anything you want to highlight.
Yeah, I think I saw that you had some of those listed, if I was correct on the one slide that was up before you popped into here. But I did jot down a couple things just to be a little bit prepared. I noticed in our first course, for the Foundations of Literacy course, my classmate Erin had a really neat assessment where the students presented on the theoretical model. So they worked together and then did presentations to teach each other the theoretical models. And we all know how helpful it is to teach something as we're learning it, to really consolidate that learning. So I thought that was neat. In Megan's phonics course, she had a pretty innovative assignment where students used Flipgrid for a 10-minute introduction of a new phonics concept.
So that was, I think, a really thoughtful assignment. And Jill's in her language comprehension course, one of the things that she did that of course has practical utility is teaching students how to score an oral reading fluency assessment, and that funneled into what they would be responsible for in that fourth course as they were working with students and administering assessments and then tutoring in response to the data. And then in my class, that final one that was focused on assessment and intervention, I had a partnership portfolio that pulled together lesson plans, a parent letter that went home, the data from throughout. Am I going too fast, Amy?
Nope, you're perfect.
you're
I'm just trying to find something. I'm just trying to scroll to it, but that's
Oh,
right.
it's okay. But those were two assignments I actually just had reworked from teaching before. So I think it just, if I were to add any extra little tidbits here, having taken something that existed and reworked it, there were things that were redeemable, there were some things that worked well when it was more of a balanced literacy course, and there were things I had to trash and not be too sad about because there were other really great things I could plug in. So you'll see like that partnering with families brochure, that was something that we had done that fit. It was a nice way for students to get experience, sharing some strategies and sharing a little overview of what they were receiving in their tutoring situation. And it was good practice for the kinds of letters that we send home as educators. I think the only other thing I'd want to share is sort of connected to what Dr. Stoller was saying earlier, and that's, we all know that this is a recursive process. I remember when I was working as an adjunct, feeling like I was up against the wire, making the changes I was able to make with colleagues. And I did get pulled into revising some key assessments and courses, even as an adjunct, because I taught courses that were connected to other courses, and we were all working together. But you're always up against a deadline. So as I was revising this old course and gutting it, to be honest, it was a bit of a demolition and rebuilding process. I really got an appreciation for the amount of time that it takes, but also how worthwhile this process is and what a gift you're giving to your students who are getting the right thing early in their careers and not having to do that relearning process that so many of us have been engaged in. And I think I also recognized that at a certain point, you have to teach it. You have to turn something in. It has to be done. You have to submit it to your dean or whomever, right? So if we were to go back and keep working on this, if this was a real, if it was really Trailblazer University, which is what we named our fake school, then we could go back later and tighten some things up. I think we found from feedback from Amy that we could have done a little bit more to prepare students for that reading academy in the fourth course, to make sure that they had a little bit more experience with administering assessments, for example, before they were being taught so many of them and asked to use them in that final course sequence. So just, a little bit of encouragement there that it doesn't have to be perfect the first time. That first revision is an important one, and then we can always go back to it and make improvements later. That's the same thing I tell teachers in my consulting, work. This work is never done, but we have each other and, and networks like this to keep growing. So yeah, thanks for letting me share.
Thanks, Amanda. That's so great. And I have to say that after viewing all these great different example syllabus projects, I have great ideas now for things that I'm going to revise when we do go back and revise. So I think having examples is so nice, as Amanda kind of shared. So thank you. So the next one that I want to talk about just real quickly is we also have a 3-course sequence. And again, we're going to give you a link example to that. And this one, Foundations of Reading, Phonics Phonology, Language Comprehension. And this group really wove in, because they only had 3 courses to work with, so they didn't have a standalone assessment and intervention course. So they really wove in assessment and intervention ideas throughout all 3 courses, but especially the number 2 and number 3. So does any doctoral student here you don't have to, but does anybody want to say anything about if you developed a 3-course sequence?
Sure. So I think, Janelle, we both maybe would share just briefly, but the two of us worked together along with another doctoral student, Jamie, and we found that when we were approaching this, we again divided it this way, and part of what was guiding us from the beginning was thinking about, you know, the simple view of reading. And in the first course, I worked on that. So sorry, I'm Lisa Tripoletti. I'm in Richmond, Virginia.
And Lisa, do you want to say that your background in higher ed, because Lisa's
sure. Yeah, so I'm teaching in an elementary program at Virginia Commonwealth University, and so this was a unique opportunity to kind of, to Amanda's point, there's a lot of time that goes into building a course syllabus, and then you teach it and then you make revisions. And so this was a unique opportunity to get to collaborate with two other people and really work together. I think that was critical, because we were, you know, working on our own courses, but yet they all needed to be connected. And we spent a lot of time mapping them and going back and, you know, making revisions, and we're still making some revisions, but we worked on a foundations course, so really introducing you know, key concepts, and that course would then lead into the phonics and phonology, and then the language comprehension courses. And I think that we all probably would agree that there's probably more in our syllabi than perhaps could be accomplished in that amount of time. But we wanted to have you know, things that, again, we could try and then revise as needed. I don't know, Janelle, do you, I mean, I could just briefly say, I would say one thing that from the foundations course, one thing that, again, we were trying to think about is just how can we give some background information and allow for opportunities to start to learn some of even just the terminology and some of that key content area, and then also give them opportunities to do some peer teaching, and, you know, have some experiences that would then lead them into the others. So Janelle, I'll let you talk about the other ones.
But Lisa covered a lot of it. You did a nice job. Thank you. I'm Janelle Bowman. I'm an intervention coach. So I support elementary schools. I work across 7 buildings and then in a preschool as well. And I did the word recognition side of the reading group and developed the phonological aspect of instruction, essentially. And so we did, again, we also took the same book. So explicit instruction was in all of our courses. We used it across all 3. And then we used the core reading source book in 2 of our courses. And then it was a resource for our 3rd course. And then the 2 extra courses, I, of course, used ones that had more to do with phonics teaching. So I did the word recognition book by O'Connor, and then structured literacy interventions by Spear and Swierling. And then the rest of them came and talked more about that comprehension piece. So we did comprehension blueprint and then teaching and reading understanding. And so one thing that we did in both of those courses that were after the initial was we offered opportunities or provided opportunities for kids or students, I shouldn't say kids, to go work in schools, to do observations of teachers, and then also to create lessons that would be shared with peers, but then also could be practiced with students in a school. So kind of a field experience within those. And we gave them resources to plan lessons. So one was explicitly on phonemic awareness, one was on a phonics lesson, and then a vocabulary lesson and a comprehension lesson. So those were all embedded in our courses. So students had a chance to practice those skills that we were hoping that they would gather from their instruction. And then the rest of it, I would say, like, it was just, as Lisa said, it was really about us getting together quite often and really making sure that we kit everything. I think we spent more time planning than we did independently, just trying to make sure that everything aligned and fit together nicely.
That's the luxury that people don't often have in, you know, in their jobs, is to collaboratively plan across courses with their coworkers. So,
but I would say it's crucial. That's what we did at Mount St. Joe when we changed to the science of reading, and it was hard. We got together and we said, what are you covering? What am I covering? And using, and that's what I will say is why we created that planning tool and why we think it's really helpful is at Mount St. Joe, we were all on the same page with science of reading, but we were doing some redundancy and not having time for things that we needed. And when we used that planning tool and really looked at, what we were teaching in each class, we realized, oh, I'm teaching this and so are you. Yeah, you probably should teach this, and then that frees me up some time to do something that's not in my class. So I think that's the other nice thing about working together with a tool that has standards that we know are connected to the science of reading and having those conversations. So yeah, and I should say Janelle is also an adjunct professor at Mount St. Joseph, and Jamie Peevler, the third person, is a instructor at Mount St. Joseph as well. So again, a lot of our doctoral students have higher ed experience and brought that to bear on this assignment. So I think these will be really wonderful resources for the field. I'm excited to be able to share them with all of you. All right, and then finally we have an example of a 2-course sequence, and we have a couple examples that are coming, but I believe Una is here and was going to talk a little bit about the 2-course sequence that she and Jen Ferlito created.
Absolutely. So I will start this off by saying that we really had a difficult time conceptualizing how we would address the volume of content that we know we needed to address for our assignment, but also thinking about the content that teachers would need in order to be able to effectively teach reading and writing. So across the top, that was a big challenge. We decided to split the content into 2 main strands, and I recognize our titles there don't really give that much of an indicator of what we actually covered in each one of them. But we really used the MSJ samples and thought about condensing across 2 courses. So Jen Ferlito built course 1 that really addressed the foundational models of reading, the psychology of reading, and then word recognition. So that was the first course, leading into the second course, where that was more of the language comprehension piece, vocabulary comprehension, fluency, writing, and then also the assessment, intervention, and MTSS side. So it was a bit of a challenge condensing all of that in. To accomplish that, I think we had to think really strategically about which texts we chose. First and foremost, we used the Christopher Such Art and Science of Teaching Primary Reading across both courses. Just speaking for myself, I found it to be a wonderful read. I really appreciated how concise and clear it was, but also its brevity, I think, was very helpful for thinking about such a condensed time frame. So we used that across both courses, and that I think was a really helpful piece. And then it was Jen's idea to use the UFly manual for the phonics course. And I think there were 2 main purposes for that. Firstly, there's a really, again, clear and concise front matter, I think about 40 pages or so, where it really beautifully covers a lot of that key content that we would want to address in a word recognition course. So we found that to be a really helpful tool. But then also thinking about the assignments and evaluations that were built into that word recognition course, Jen had them do sections of a word recognition lesson, mini sections sort of dispersed throughout the course, and then putting it together at the end with the delivery of a full word recognition lesson plan. So I think in her mind, she was very hopeful that using the UFly resource would be helpful to give that structure, knowing that sometimes that practice support would be helpful as students gained capacity delivering that type of instruction. So that was in the first course. And then in the second course, I did also draw from explicit instruction as well, especially some of those videos, but I did largely use the SMART and Haugen fundamentals of literacy instruction and assessment for that as well. In terms of key assignments, I think it's quite similar to some of the other sequences that we've chatted about today. Some observations, lesson plans throughout both courses, similar to the Mount St. Joe sample syllabi with the comprehension course. I had students reflect on their readings and use some of those comprehension-based practices to work through and process their readings, such as, paragraph shrinking. We had them do self-regulated strategy development, graphic organizer for one of their readings. So helping them learn about those practices through those practices. It was challenging to think about fitting the assessment piece into it. I would have loved to have included full training on a universal screener. With limited time, we focused just on oral reading fluency, the Acadians ORF training. But at the same point, I think it was such a balance about making sure we covered what we needed to, but recognizing that there was limited time for it. I don't know if that covers everything you were.
Yeah, that's great. Una, could you say a little bit about your background in GENS, just so people know who created the courses?
So Jen Ferlito is a speech pathologist just outside of Detroit. And I am Una Malcolm. I'm an interventionist in Toronto, Ontario.
And they're also humble. They both do lots of teacher training and have lots of good work connected with universities as well. So we, as I said, we are really fortunate to have extremely talented doctoral students who really took hold of this project and did some great work. Although I will have to say, I think every single project, I think I made a comment like, wow, this is great, but this is a lot. Like, and I know we all feel that as faculty members, which is probably a little ironic that I was saying that because that's probably the biggest feedback I get from doctoral students about my courses. So, so I think that's just, you know, our human nature. Like we want to give them all the good stuff, and how do you make it deep, but also enough so that they can, you know, retain it and learn it and do it in practice and all those good things.
So I'm thinking about this use of the UFly Foundation's instructional program. I really am intrigued by that idea, because we often have undergraduate students create lessons, and I wonder if that would be more productive after they've experienced some good explicit instruction, right? Like, so having the support and the scaffold of having a nice program that's already, it's already got the structure in place, and experiencing delivering one of those lessons as a prelude to then eventually creating their own. I think that's really interesting. And I wondered, Amy, would you just remind us you said 8 weeks. These are 8-week courses.
They're different. So
they're different. Okay.
Yeah, and they'll say them at the right at the beginning of right here. They'll say it right at the beginning of the syllabus, so you know. So Una's was a 2-course when they did 15 weeks. So more traditional undergrad, at least how we do our undergrad, is across 16 weeks. Meeting twice a week for an hour and a half kind of thing. So some are 8 weeks. So we tried to have some different formats even across the different types. So that was one of the challenges, right? Do it.
Yep.
Yeah,
Una, somebody was asking, is the UFly Foundation's a tier 1 program?
Yes, and I think it could be used to intensify with tier 2, but I believe that that's predominantly what it's built for. And Stephanie, just to piggyback off your point, I would hate to speak for Jen, but I know that was really one of her key thoughts, is instead of having somebody create a lesson plan without maybe the background knowledge or the experience for it, help them establish that with a very nicely designed program, with the thought of them having that program when they move into the profession. First of all, they'll have it with them, but then also they'll have more of the background knowledge to actually do that more effectively once they've had that practice and experience.
Stephanie Edgren, I know you're not feeling great today, but you dropped in the chat that you have used the West Virginia Phonics, which is free online through the Tools for Reading. I don't know if you wanted to share anything about your experience in integrating that into your course. Similar structure, I think, to the UFly lessons.
Yeah, I think that that was the thing I noticed when I first was an adjunct and I was co-teaching with someone who had taught the course for a while. I was doing primarily the grading, and they really struggled coming up with phonemic awareness and phonics lessons and knowing what to do. So the following year when I taught it, I talked to Pepe and thought, you know, what about giving them a lesson structure for phonemic awareness and for phonics? And so when I introduced the West Virginia Phonics, I showed them the lesson. We walked through it. I modeled a lesson, but I did tell them they could modify that, but that gave them that lesson structure. These are the components that need to be part of a solid phonics lesson. So it had the, the phonemic awareness, it had articulation, it had the modeling, the I do, we do, you do, it had the word reading, the word building, the dictation, the decodable text. So I think in hindsight, they got more out of it. If we think about giving our students or utilizing the gradual release model in our own classrooms or our courses, we model a lesson, we do one together. Well, just showing them one isn't helpful enough. So I think that having them use something else for their lesson allows them to have that we do and I do kind of mixed together.
Yep.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely.
But I definitely saw better quality lessons when they had that model. So I love the idea of UFly because I think that I like that it gives that the additional material at the front, that content that they need to have to understand versus here's a phonics lesson. It extends that learning.
There's another great question in the chat. Megan is asking, does anyone still have a children's literature course? Amy Murdoch, you're not allowed to respond to this. I'm just kidding you. I'm kidding you. I know this is on your mind. She says, I'm trying to embed more comprehension and vocabulary purposefully into that course. Anybody have any good experience and tips with integrating comprehension and vocab into a traditional children's lit course?
In my class, we're doing activities with the different genres. So I think it could easily, and we do, I'm not going to say that we have great comprehension things, but it's more about looking at the different genres and what's out there and exploring that. It's more introductory level for our students. But I think you could definitely find some ways to put comprehension and vocabulary. A portion of our class, we do a book study on I'm trying to think of the book that we use, Fish in a Tree, and they're all required to have different parts. So one person's a summarizer, one person's the word wizard, one person does another activity. So I think it's easy to incorporate some of those things into a children's lit class.
One of the things, oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say, we do that as well. We focus on the genre, but they have different comprehension and vocabulary exercises. Like they do reciprocal teaching, and they do book clubs. They write their own book. So we weave in a little bit of writing for fiction writing. But we also in that course deal with the diversity issues and making sure students see literature, identities. We've kept that piece there.
That fits really nicely, I think.
Yeah. And I'm thinking out loud with this, and Pepe's here, so she teaches it on campus, I teach it off, but that would really be a nice way to free up some content from some other classes to incorporate the language strand in children's lit, because foundations and literacy methods is really packed. And while children's lit and all of those other things are important to do, I think we could also incorporate background knowledge, vocabulary, the language structure, the text structure. Yeah, I think that would be a great place. My brain is spinning now. Thanks, Stephanie.
I'd like to add, even though I'm not supposed to, that
Just teasing you.
Yeah. We also in our children's lit class use the core knowledge. Like we do all of those things with vocabulary and language. We actually use Isabella Beck and have them kind of create vocabulary tier 2 and comprehension lessons. But we also use core knowledge, and we have students look at the free core knowledge resources and have them create, connected to a science or social studies theme, how do you build background knowledge and push in some of this language comprehension and writing was the other piece that we added into a science and social studies class. So, and core knowledge has fabulous free resources, talk about nice models of how to build background knowledge. So just another resource.
If anybody has a sample of a children's lit course that they would be willing to share, that would be terrific. You can, drop a link in the chat or email it to me, stephanie.stoller@msj.edu. And you can send it, like I said before, anonymously or with your info on it. Either way is perfectly fine.
with us. We'll distribute it with this other set of samples. Kara is asking, do special education graduates get more courses? So maybe this is related to Ohio and the 4 core courses. So do they go deeper into assessments or intervention in additional coursework?
Not in the state of Ohio, not the individual universities might not do any different things, but the 4 courses in Ohio are for all special ed, early childhood, middle childhood teachers. So it's a great question. I'll tell you, as a director of a graduate program for so many years, I was initially, I've worked at Mount St. Joe now for 15 years. And when I first started, I was a little shocked that people applying to the graduate program, I would over and over again see special education teachers having fewer reading courses than early childhood or general education elementary ed teachers. I don't know if that's just an Ohio thing or across the board. I've read things that it might be not just Ohio, but I definitely experienced that and was very surprised. And we get a lot of, in our graduate program, we get a lot of special educators for that exact reason, because they are like, that's 99% of my job. And I was not prepared in undergraduate to teach reading. And now I need to teach reading intervention, and I really don't know what to do. So that's just anecdotal though.
Mm-hmm. I'm just scanning through the chat. I hope I didn't miss anybody's question or comment. Feel free to unmute. You don't have to wait for me to bring it up.
I had something, Stephanie, as we were talking about the children's lit class, my mind went to letters. I just did a training last week for Unit 7, which is focused on comprehension. And it has a really nice comprehension planning checklist that I think could be really helpful in a children's lit class. And one of the things as I was modeling the lesson and going through with teachers last week that I brought up is, think about how we're building knowledge across a text set. So as you're introducing these children's literature selections, how do we pull them together cohesively? What is it that's the enduring understanding that cuts across all of those texts that we can deepen as we read each one? So, in letters, it has a document that takes you through before, during, and after reading considerations. It has a nice planning document. So you're establishing the purpose for reading and determining what is that enduring understanding. And again, I think, how does it connect to the other texts that we're reading and where we're going throughout the course and throughout the year? But then there's also things early on, like considering the text structure and how that influences the graphic organizers that we use during reading, selecting vocabulary and what needs to be pre-taught versus what we can teach lightly. Preparing background knowledge, right? Identifying challenging language. We've all read books to kids that year after year, they all struggle with the same part. Why is that? What can we do ahead of time to prepare for that? And then during reading, one of the things I feel like letters does really well is having us interrogate how we're asking questions. There's a place for those questions that we ask that are literal, especially if we're reading a text multiple times. To get the gist of what's happening, if it's fiction, to look at those story elements. But then as we're coming back to that, right, what are those queries we can be asking that go a little bit deeper, that are more inferential, that really lead us to those enduring understandings? And then lastly, really thinking about how we're assessing student learning and whether our objectives have been met. And I just think that would be such a nice layer if you are still being asked to teach children's lit. We could at least teach it really intentionally. And I think the biggest shift for the teachers that I work with is querying, asking those deep questions that are leading students not just to what happened in that one text, but to that enduring understanding, to like why it matters in the world. And those things we can carry with us into the next text that we read. So I just wanted to share that.
Amanda, do you have a sense of how close that letters comprehension planning tool is to, say, like the blueprint, Nancy Hennessy's blueprint? I sense that there's a lot of overlap there.
Yeah.
So if people haven't taken letters, or you can't, for copyright reasons, take that out of there and put it in your course, but you could use Nancy's blueprint book.
Yeah, you could. I've actually merged the two too, and I'd be happy to drop that into the chat. It'll take me a second to find it, but I created a mashup for the teachers that I support. So I'll just drop that into the chat in a moment.
So I know you just are finishing a heavy semester and looking for a break, but not to pile more work on you, but I'm thinking I would love to see an example of that. Maybe that's something we plan in one of these future follow-ups.
Yeah.
Love to have you walk through that planning. I'd really
I,
like to see that example.
I'd be happy to. I always make more work for myself, so it's fine.
Sorry, I'm not trying to punish you for having a really good idea. Okay, thank you, Amy.
Yeah, so I know we're kind of running out of our time. I think the last thing we wanted to just make sure we said, unless there's other questions or comments, is just to remind you of the different ways you can stay connected to us and work. We have the Facebook group. We have the way that you can connect and make sure you're on this email list and get other information as we have it available. And then just to remind people that the Reading League also has a community of practice around higher education that you can join. Stephanie, anything you want to say about that?
Second Friday of every month. So I think that's this Friday. Am I right about that? I think it's tomorrow. Yes, tomorrow. It's always the second Friday of the month. It's 2:30 Eastern to 4 Eastern. And we use that same Zoom link each time. Carrie Curto from the Reading League facilitates that. So hopefully people will join us there also.
And then we have some upcoming dates for this group to continue meeting, and we're open to ideas too. I mean, Stephanie and I kind of just did this right before the Reading League event because we wanted to kind of keep that momentum going. But these topics can definitely change as, you know, as people have good ideas about topics that might be helpful to you or other things that you might like to share. So we really didn't see this as having to be a Mount St. Joe led kind of thing. We really love the idea of this alliance. So if you have an idea of something that you or your colleagues would like to share that you think might be helpful to this group, just know that we would love that. We would love to hear other examples as well. So.
Yep. And if you have a problem with practice that you'd like to bring to this group, something you're struggling with and would like some, you know, other heads to think about with you, this is a great place to do that too. So feel free to drop that in the chat or reach out to us. That would be terrific. Or guest speakers or really anything. We're super open.
Yeah. Also, if anybody is going to Plain Talk, do you want to say anything about Plain Talk, Stephanie?
Yes. So the Plain Talk about, I think they called it now, the Plain Talk about Language and Literacy Conference in New Orleans, March 8th through the 10th, is an excellent professional learning opportunity. And I would really like to gather anybody who's going to be there so we can get together in person and maybe do something informal, but also productive. I have some ideas I'd like to run past folks to get together maybe the afternoon before the conference actually starts, or maybe it starts on a Wednesday as a half day or something like that. I don't know. I haven't worked out the details, but if you're going to be there, definitely let me know so that we can, we'll share this out through the Facebook group once we get the plans in place and through the STARS email distribution. But, and I think I saw Mary Wennerstein here. If you're going to be at Plain Talk, I want to engage you in a harebrained scheme that I'm cooking up.
Well, great. I would love to meet and talk with you. I don't know if I'm going to Plain Talk. I'm also a letters trainer, and I already booked some sessions I'm reading. So, but I would love to meet with you.
We could connect another way. Yeah, it's an excellent conference. If you have any opportunity, you know, you haven't blown your travel conference budget, put this one on your radar and register very, very soon because it sells out. It's a really large conference. So anyway, stay tuned. Hopefully we'll get to meet in person. That would be really fun.
Stephanie, it looked like a lot of people in the chat were putting that they were going. So that's great.
Oh, good. Does that get recorded with the?
Yeah, I can send you the list of it. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, it's nice to see that because we weren't sure if there would be a good group or not going.
Very good.
Great.
All right.
All right. Well, thank you. We're right at the time. So thanks everyone
Perfect.
for joining us. Yeah. Good to see
Yeah.
everyone.
Thank you all for being here, really, especially at this time of year, and happy holidays to everyone. And I hope you get a wonderful long break. Decompress and get ready for starting up again at the new year, right? Yeah. Very good. All right. Thanks,
Bye, everyone.
everybody.
Thank you.